Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And there has been a lot of demand for this 9.1 ranged DPS prediction list. I was a bit hesitant to release it due to the fact that there has now been more ongoing changes than I think I've ever seen before at this point in expansion for an upcoming patch. It's almost like a completely different expansion moving forward, which means that a lot of these specs are shifting, at least in my own personal placement. Under this tier list, I've constructed it as hype. This means that it's getting a lot of new additions, or it's just going to be an incredibly powerful position. Solid means that it's going to be a great pick. It's getting good additions. Average means that it's not really changing too much, or maybe it's even a little bit more awkward than before. And then high risk could be hype, is a spec where it could easily be hype, but it could also just be completely avoid this, and you may want to be careful with selecting it. And then avoid is just what it says. You may want to outright avoid it, or at least it's not getting as nearly as much touch-ups, or potentially it's just getting nerfed down to the ground comparatively to the other specializations. So Affliction Warlock is having its main legendary Sacrilash reworked to now more so maintain your Curse of Exhaustion rather than just being a passive slow. You are getting quite a significant buff to your overall damage. However, for Affliction Warlocks to operate, you're going to need a huge amount of damage. There is another legendary coming in that isn't related to a slow. It's related to your Night Fae Covenant that is going to grant you a lot of haste and crit every time you use Soul Rot. This legendary has potential, but to trade off not having that constant slow is going to be a dangerous gamble. This was your one way of dealing with melee DPS, and now Death Knights getting multiple death grips. It's going to be very difficult, and I do imagine Death Knights and Feral Druids, these particularly high mobility melee DPS, are going to be in a powerful position, and having lost your slow legendary brings very high concerns, at least for me, on Affliction. I think that it's likely to be in an average position in the hands of the best player. It's likely going to do a tremendous amount of damage. So at lower ratings or mid ratings, I think that you'll still be able to make it work. But then when you get up into the upper echelons of the best compositions, I think that is where you're going to start to struggle to create pressure and momentum. Still having your Dark Soul be purgeable is going to be pretty tough, because I'm anticipating Shadow Priest to be pretty good, Elemental to be pretty good. We'll get to those. And also Hunters are receiving a new way to sort of like purge down buffs. And this is why I think that's going to be a bit stressful for an Affliction lock. So to me, it's going to be about average. I think it's going to do a lot of damage, but you're also going to die really fast. So it prevents it, and it's not really getting too many things that are very hype. The other Warlock specializations, I think, are going to be a little bit more excited about what they're getting. The ability to teleport a target to your portal is a bit aggressive as an Affliction Warlock, who is now you're already going to be losing mobility. So to take the risk of putting your circle in a position where you want to try and pull somebody out is going to be dangerous. Perhaps there are new synergies, though, and this is maybe why maybe we should put it on high risk. Could be hype. Playing with a Feral Druid that has Mortal Wounds, the Feral Druid providing a lot of healing and sustain and bleed damage with the Necrolord Covenant. There could be interesting synergies there that we haven't seen in a long time between Feral and Affliction Warlock. So maybe we should say high risk could be hype rather than average. I think maybe that's a better place for it, because of these new synergies. Or maybe pairing up with a Death Knight, like an Unholy Death Knight. If you are able to hit that threshold of overwhelming pressure, the dots paired up with the new necrotic wounds could allow you to swarm down an enemy team. So I think that's probably a more fair position to put it. High risk could be hype. Arcane Mage. This is now going to be the only specialization of Mage that has Kleptomania, so the ability to just immediately strip off a combustion. Well, you're probably not going to care, because Fire Mage got hit really hard. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, but the ability to strip off, I guess you would be more interested in a Frost Mage's Ice form, as that is likely to be my best big guess is going to be the Mage spec is Frost. However, I think Arcane could be extremely good, having a lot of immediate damage, like on huge burst damage, paired with things like Windwalkers, has already, in my mind, seen some success in the ladder. It's really hard to gauge current power on the ladder right now due to the stagnation of the player base, or at least the perceived stagnation of people playing at the moment. It's hard to gauge it, but I have run across it a couple times. It stands to be in a better spot than it was. It could be super hype, but Arcane is also a hit or miss spec. In my mind, Arcane Mage's best iteration was Legion. I really enjoyed playing with and as an Arcane Mage in Legion, generating stacks and jumping out a big barrage and spamming out Arcane Explosion. I had a lot of fun with that, but this current iteration of kind of missile spamming, it leaves it, at least for me, in a more awkward spot than it has been. I would like to see Arcane Mage kind of get the treatment that Shadow Priest got in the future. Although I don't think that's something you can expect right now. It could have a ton of burst damage with that new honor talent, sending out that big prismatic ball for huge burst damage, but it is predictable, easy to see. Maybe, though, paired up with an assassination row with how powerful they are, it's going to have high synergy. So much like the Affliction Warlock, I think it's a spec where could be hype, but it is incredibly high risk. Now, Beast Mastery Hunter, I think there's no doubt that this spec is going to be super hype. It's not going down from anywhere that it currently is, and it's one of the best specs right now in 9.0.5. It does tremendous damage, almost completely unpreventable damage. It's getting the new Tranquilizing Darts talent, which is going to allow you to quasi-purge down buffs every time you land a trank shot and an interrupt. So you can strip down these Dark Souls and strip down a lot of the powerful offensive cooldowns, the power infusions, the ice forms. The ability to just stay on a target is going to be important, as I'm expecting Frost Mages to be in a really good position. And then Beast Mastery is likely going to serve as a good counter to that. I would like to see some synergies potentially for Demon Hunters and Death Knights particularly. I think BM Hunter is going to be one of those specs where you're going to get to really experiment with different comps and different classes, unlike any time in the past, just because your output is so high, and now your ability to take down buffs, which you didn't really have the best way to do it in the past, is available to you. You still have the downside of your pet dying, which is true. I think there are some tactics to get around that, but that you will just take that into account. I still think it's going to be a phenomenal spec. Balance Druid, this one is a tough one for me. I'm expecting most players are going to be shifting covenants. It seems like they're trying to put more emphasis on Starfall for Balanced Druid, and if that is the case, then it would be my best guess that Balanced Druids are going to be shifting over to Necrolord rather than Kyrian, although Kyrian will still be good. And the main downside to Balanced Druid at the moment is that our legendary Balance of All Things is getting nerfed quite dramatically. I think so much so in PvP that there's no point in taking it. If it's not enough crit to make your Star Surge crit when you hit Eclipse, the synergy is lost. So you might go back to playing just Dreambinder Kyrian. It's probably still perfectly fine build. I'm curious to try the Covenant-specific Necrolord, where your Adaptive Swarm has a chance to spread, so that your Adaptive Swarm will be on multiple targets, providing bonus damage and bonus healing to all of your heal over time effects and damage over time effects. I would be interested to see if there's any synergies in terms of dot damage. When we look at Mortal Wounds, it sounds crazy to think that maybe Balanced Druid and Feral Druid, and I know now everybody's like, what? I was listening, I was into it, but now you said that. You never know. It's a lot of instant crowd control, and the only reason I think that maybe people weren't running that comp is because there's no Mortal Wounds. But now you've got Mortal Wounds, you've got high mobility, you can retreat away, push in for 3, 2, 1 goes. This could actually be something that's just nobody is considering. I'm even thinking double Feral Druid is going to be good with how much healing and damage and Mortal Wounds available to them. You're going to get high winds now reducing healing, which is kind of a saving grace to your durability being nerfed, and your burst damage effectively being nerfed in PvP. The only real trade-off there. So it's tough for me. For Boomkin, I think it's likely just going to end up being in an average position. It's not going to have the best synergies. Maybe I would like to see a Warlock, but again, that's a high-risk position as a Warlock. I think there's other specs that are going to synergize better with things like Demonology and Destro. So for me, Balanced Druid is likely going to be remaining at about average, probably falling down a little bit from where it was, and that's mostly attributed to your durability being nerfed and your burst damage, which was the two reasons you were powerful, right? You were in bear form, you couldn't die. If you were proccing Eclipse of the Legendary, you two-tapped people. Those two things are being removed for a trade-off on a bit of a gamble. You've still got a ton of utility, healing, and damage, so I don't think it's going to be an avoid spec, but it's not standing out to me at the moment. Demonology is getting some quality of life returned back to it. Fel Lord is finally being changed, so it's hopefully going to be relevant. Demonology is still probably going to have problems where all of its damage is front-loaded into its Demonic Tyrant. But I think pairing up with maybe elemental shamans, and with what elemental shaman is getting, it could have some opportunities for some spell cleaves. That seems to be where it's sitting at the moment. Maybe Feral Druid, although Demo already has Mortal Wounds on itself, although it's not as good. It's still present. I do wonder where it will sit. I think it's still going to be one of those ranged. You need 2 ranged to make it work. So Elemental, Demonology Warlock, maybe Frost Mage for these like high tanky Wizard Cleave compositions. I think it's probably going to fall behind Destro a bit. For me, I think it's likely going to come in about an average position, which is better than where it was before. I would have put it as a void for most of this expansion, but I think having Fell Lord helping you lock down a target, having Tyrant being durable, it's going to be put in a spot where it's going to function. I don't think it's got a huge opportunity to be super awesome. Maybe the Fell Obelisk buffing all of your pets has potential, but it's not standing out to me dramatically. Now, Destro is basically going to have a 5% nerf to its Chaos Bolt, but you can Havoc it and hit multiple targets with the removal of the single target Chaos Bolt Honor talent. So Destro is going to be doing a lot of 2-target cleave in PvP, just a lot of cleave in general. You are going to be a nasty wizard, and you're probably going to benefit the most out of the ability to teleport a target off of a pillar, because people run away from you as a Destro lock a lot. So if they're line of sighting and you Shadow Rift them, I believe that's what it's called, back into the middle onto your demonic circle, and then you have a Frost Mage just constantly slowing them, preventing them from getting back to the pillar, or maybe Frost Mage using Ice Wall to prevent their retreat, there's strong opportunities for Destro. I mean, we're already seeing it more and more with Chanimal in particular in the AWC. I think that Destro is likely to be a solid spec. I'm a little bit hesitant to put it on hype, because there's a lot of melee DPS that are getting insane stuff, and they might be able to run it over, but it has the potential, and I think it is going to be a solid spec for sure. I'm a bit hesitant to put it on the hype, but definitely solid. Now, Elemental Shaman is getting a lot of stuff. It's going to be getting most importantly, some quality of life to its flame shock removal, so that when you remove a flame shock, the target gets hit, knocked up in the air. And from seeing some videos, it looks like it procs from your mastery, so you can double proc it, and they get double hit by it, and that can be a substantial amount of damage. And that you are already a solid spec in my mind. So having some quality of life buffs to your spec, your synergies with things like Destro. I've seen even Smexen, for example, playing Elemental with Beast Mastery Hunter and doing really well with that. That comp could be very strong. Elemental Demonology Warlock, Elemental Balance Druid. You're going to have basically kind of your pick of the litter as Elemental. Elemental Feral might even be surprisingly good, and that's something I don't think we've ever seen, just based on the fact that Feral has Mortal Wounds now. The main reason you took a Warrior in that position instead. I am curious to see how it does. You're also getting the Lightning Totem that can pin targets out in the midfield. Going to be great for something like a Destro lock again. These mechanics being introduced to try and prevent people from turtling. They could be hit or miss, right? They could either just make it so that wizards are reigning supreme, or maybe they don't really matter. They buffed the health on that totem recently, so it doesn't just die immediately to one attack. I'm interested to see how it fits. I think that it's going to be in a solid position. It was already great, and I think that it's just getting better. So solid position for Elemental. Maybe I should put it up on hype. Why don't I not want to feel like putting Elemental Shaman up on hype? I don't know what it is. I think, again, just because it's a ranged DPS, and I'm a bit worried about melee cleaves, like even Death Knight Feral Warrior, Double Feral, like these melee cleaves, maybe running them over now after seeing a lot of the changes. Rep Paladins removing all these magics, but maybe the Rep Paladin gets punished with the Flame Shock Dispel. I think I feel more comfortable putting it as solid at the moment, until we watch things play out. Fire Mage, I think, is going to be a spec where you're going to want to avoid. The main reason for this is that you're losing Kleptomania. Well, that's obviously a buff and a nerf to mostly Fire Mage. We're just countering other Fire Mage by being able to Klepto and cancel it off. That mind game is no longer going to be happening. Nerfs to Infernal Cascade, basically nerfs to your damage during combustion, basically nerfs to the only time in the game where you matter, I think are going to be the main reasons you want to avoid this. The fact that Fire Mage was good in basically all content meant that it had a huge bullseye on it for getting nerfed, be it Mythic Plus or PvP. I would be getting prepared to switch from Fire, in my mind personally. Safer pick would be Frost, but if you want to be that Arcane Dream, this might actually be the patch to do it. Again, high risk, could be hype, but I would personally avoid Fire. I'd start saving my Soul Ash to get ready to craft a different legendary. And oh, you run Triune Ward, so maybe you don't have to worry about that. But maybe you want to try out a more aggressive legendary. Tough to give up the Triune Ward. Maybe that's not a good recommendation. Don't go up the Triune Ward. Keep the Triune Ward. Maybe save your Soul Ash if you want to try stuff out for some different comps. But yeah, I think Fire's gonna have a tough time. Still probably play the same comps: Fire Mage Warrior, Fire Mage Rogue, maybe Fire Mage Feral, and then finally we get to Frost Mage. And I think that Frost Mage is likely to be a very hype spec. Having a quality of life change to where your Frost Bolts are just doing more damage all of the time is going to allow you to create a lot of sustained pressure. I think pairing up with something like a Feral Druid that's high mobility, good support, crowd control diminishing returns that don't share with yours is going to allow you to overwhelm targets. Assassination Rogue, Frost Mage, I think is going to be a phenomenal composition. You're just going to do a lot of damage. I'm not certain on this Ice Wall talent. It looks really cool in theory, but how is it going to play out? You can target the Ice Wall, break down the Ice Wall. Could be fun to try, right? If you wanted to give it a go. That's why I think it's a little bit hype. I think the main thing for me is that its damage is just being allocated in a way that I think it's going to be a threat at all times, which is something as a Mage player, I think Mage players have been waiting for. And your synergies are great just in general with the specs that are getting buffed a lot, like Feral Druid and Assassination Rogue. So for me, I think Frost Mage is going to be extremely hype. Marksmanship Hunter, this is another spec where it started the expansion just one-tapping people in PvP, doing a huge amount of damage in PvE. It had a big bullseye on it, ironically, being a hunter. And I don't see anything coming to it that BM isn't getting, that BM isn't already better than it as. So for me, I think Marksman, again, is probably a spec to avoid. It's a bit weird how the specs, I guess maybe it's almost predictable. The specs that were really good at the start or somehow managed to not get nerfed, poor hunters, now are on the bottom, and I'm saying to avoid. It's kind of like this shift that happens. Maybe they'll get something looked at them. I'm not sure if there's going to be any more updates. That last round with the Death Knight changes seemed to be like a really big one, so I'm not sure. But for me, Marksmanship Hunter being stationary, easily line of sightable. Maybe there's some synergy I'm trying to think of here. If you play with Destro Warlock, that already doesn't sound great on paper. Not a lot of hybrid healing. Fury Warrior, why wouldn't you want to just play with a Mage if you're going to bring ranged for burst? It's really tough. BM is just going to do more damage than you. Yeah, I don't really see. Again, for me, Marksman is kind of a spec that I hope in the future gets the Shadow Priest treatment, like at the start of Shadowlands. And gets changed up a little bit because its stationary nature, at least in PvP, is not one that is easy to balance, because you either are just completely KOing people because you're the stationary class that can't move, which may not be fun for the people getting KO'd, or you're just standing there not really doing very much, falling over. So it's tough being a Marksmanship Hunter. I think for right now, I'd feel comfortable putting on Avoid. And now we've got finally the Shadow Priest. And I think the Shadow Priest is getting a sustained damage buff. However, some of your self-healing and your Greater Fade are getting slightly nerfed. I don't think they're getting nerfed so much that they're going to be completely off the table. I think your synergies with other wizards, like Elemental Shaman and Destro Warlock and Frost Mage, are going to be great. There could be some hidden synergies. We already know that Shadow Priest Mage is great. Shadow Priest Assassination is great. Those specs are just getting better. Maybe Shadow Priest Feral. This is another comp that we haven't seen in some time, but having Mortal Wounds in the Feral Druid, high mobility, some nice utility to try and assist with the Shadow Priest, might put it in a good spot. I think that Shadow Priest is likely. Do we want to put it? This is a hard one, because in my mind it was already S tier. It was already super hype, so I feel like you probably want to put it there. I think it's going to be the core of a lot of comps. It already is, and I think it's going to continue to be. Getting the Mass Dispel, actually I'm not 100% sure if the Mass Dispel Honor talent is available to you as Shadow, to be able to Mass Dispel faster. But I think the main reason why I think Shadow will be good is just the conduit that reduces the mana cost of your Purge. The ability to just mash Purge at effectively no cost is very powerful, as a lot of specs have had their cooldowns now be purgeable. And I think that Purge meta is going to be important. Mages have Spell Steal, Hunters have Trank Shot, and now that Tranquilizing Dart Honor talent, Shadow Priests have the ability to Purge. I think being able to Purge is going to be important, as I'm expecting Druid and maybe even Holy Priest to be in a really good spot, and removing their buffs is going to be super important. So I think it's fair to put it on hype. Maybe we should order this. I think Frost Mage maybe the most hype, Shadow the second most hype, and then BM the third. And then when we look at Destro and Ellie, it'll be Ellie then Destro. We look at Boomkin and Demo. Boomkin and Demo is probably fair. Probably Arcane then Aff, and then Fire Mage, and then Marksmanship Hunter. So we've got 3 specs on hype, 2 specs on solid, 2 specs on average, 2 specs on high risk could be hype, and then 2 specs to just probably avoid or at least get ready to switch from. You're going to be taking a pretty big risk running them for the aforementioned reasons, where they've had all the attention from being this very powerful spec for either a little bit of time or quite a substantial amount of time. So moving into 9.1, I hope that this list has been helpful to you. If it was, please leave it with a thumbs up and comment down below with your thoughts, what you think is going to happen in 9.1. There's a ton of synergy changes. There's a lot of opportunities for some new compositions. Like I said, 9.1 looks like an entirely new expansion, at least when it comes to PvP. I am very excited and grateful for all of these additional honor talent changes. I hope that we see more in the future. I hope we also see more of the class reworks like we saw at the beginning of Shadowlands, because if we do, I think that PvP could definitely be in a great spot. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.